It's
Yeah, my
recorded.
name is Warren Allmand. I was a member of Parliament for a little over 31 years and a minister in the Trudeau government between 1972 and 1979. Um, I served as Solicitor General of Canada, Minister of Indian and Northern Affairs, and Minister for Consumer and Corporate Affairs. We were in opposition from, we were with the Liberal Party. We were in opposition from 1984 to 1993, and at that time I was a critic for employment and later immigration in the opposition. And we, in the election of 1993, our country was faced with a huge deficit, which was the result, it started and was aggravated by the OPEC oil crisis, which was earlier, which led to great increases in prices and found its way into the entire economy. There were also other matters that contributed to the deficit. So in the election of 1993, we were in opposition, and Mr. Chrétien was our leader at that time, and the deficit was a major issue. We promised to take steps to reduce the deficit, but in our platform, we said we would do it by increasing revenues and by cutting non-essential expenditure. And of course, what was essential and non-essential was an important question that came up later. Our Minister of Finance was Paul Martin, who was a pretty popular and competent individual. He brought in a budget in 1995 which made substantial cuts to government programs. Unfortunately, in that budget, there was a provision for over $7 billion of cuts to post-secondary education and to health care. Although I was a member of the same party as Paul, and I argued that that was contrary to what we promised in the election of '93. I said we said we would deal with the deficit, which I supported, but we would deal with it through increasing revenues and through cutting non-essential matters. And I said that healthcare and post-secondary education were not essential matters. There was some sympathy for my point of view in the caucus. We had a majority government at that time, and a lot of new members came in '93 when we defeated the Conservatives. While a number of people agreed with me, they weren't really willing to go public with it. As we had quite a discussion in caucus, but I couldn't get enough support for changes. So when the budget finally came to a vote, I voted against those measures. I think I was the only one in our caucus, in the government caucus, to do so. And the Prime Minister, I was chairing the Standing Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs at that time, and they had me removed. I still remained a member of the caucus in the Liberal Party. I felt that on most issues I agreed with them, but on this one I did not. I argued that, that in the long run, cutting major amounts from post-secondary education, which by the way was money provided to the provinces, we were really going to hinder the economy in the long run, because your economic well-being depends on the level of education, training, the professionalism of your workforce. And to take steps which might prevent people from getting a university education, getting an education in engineering and science and technology and all the other subjects that are related to the strength of an economy was short-sighted. To say my arguments did not prevail, we did, in about, by the time of the next election, which was 1997, there was substantial reduction of the deficit. So this worked, but it certainly disrupted especially our healthcare system. Nurses were laid off. Wait times in hospitals increased. And what's interesting, so yes, if one was looking for ways to deal with a deficit, you can make major across-the-board cuts, but I think it's an error to cut things which are essential to your society and to your economy, especially in the longer run. I mean, what's the good of reducing the deficit in 3 or 4 years, and then you end up with other problems in 7 or 8 years, is what happened, really. Yes, a program of cuts combined with measures to stimulate the economy, to bring in more revenue, to deal with issues of foreign trade, to make sure your prices are competitive for both internally and externally is very important. But I certainly would argue against the cuts have to be very selective and very focused on certain matters that can take the cuts. Of course, there'll always be some spin-off that will hurt some people, but you got to make sure that in cutting you hurt as few people as possible, and also make sure that you don't undermine the future of your country and your economy.
And you mentioned that some of these cuts were obviously passed on to the provinces.
Yes.
What were the reactions of the provincial and the local politicians to
Well,
to
the provincial governments were quite upset. Most of them were upset, and then some of them they felt it was a downloading of issues to their level of government. Of course, in Canada, different than the UK, we have a federal system, so many areas of government are totally under provincial jurisdiction, including, by the way, education. But the federal government helped post-secondary education not by administering it or managing it, but by supplying funds, in particular to funds to provinces that were poorer than other provinces, so that the purpose being that we would try and equalize opportunity in all parts of Canada, regardless of their wealth and so on. So the provinces had to deal with this, and some of them, in turn, had to cut as well, because, or they did cut in order to, because they had deficits as well. And of course, municipalities in Canada, which are the creation of provincial governments and are governed by laws passed by provincial governments, in most provinces, as far as I know, and I know in Quebec, in Montreal, cities cannot run a deficit. So they have to, if revenue is down, they have to cut programs to meet their revenue. And they have more restricted sources of revenue than provincial and federal governments. They don't have income taxes. For the most part, they have, and I've been opposed to that, they have to rely on real estate taxes from which they raise on people's properties, both commercial and private homes and so on. This can often put a big burden on people, especially people who've had a good job and bought a house, and then they if the taxes go up and they're laid and they're out of work, or they've gone on pension, they may often force them to sell their houses that they've been in for many years. Anyway, this situation had impacts at all levels of government. in municipalities, in school boards, provincial governments, and at the federal level.
Yeah. Okay, so I suppose the last question was just to ask you to kind of crystal ball gaze a bit and say, you know, if you were appointed the leader, the political leader of a typical council in England tomorrow and faced with cuts, bearing in mind that UK councils have education, social services, housing, planning, you know, they have a very wide range of competencies. What would you do? What kinds of measures do you think you would take in your first year of office to cut some of the deficit or to save money? And the councils are being asked to make 30% savings.
Well, when you're talking of town councils and city councils,
Yeah, city councils,
local government,
county councils, city councils.
I presume in the UK, well, the UK is too, because Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own.
Yeah, they have their own.
But I presume that they are also creations of the national government, and their charters are controlled by the national government.
Less so than here.
Less so than here.
Yeah, less so than here.
Well, I don't know what their powers of taxation are.
Similar. There's a
lot of real estate.
Yeah,
and,
there's
yeah, well, that makes it very difficult.
Council tax is a real estate tax.
Well, I mean, I think it would seem to me that there must be an association of municipalities, local government,
local government
and they would have to be, because alone they can't do this. It's the national government really has the major impact on these issues, and but it will affect what the municipality has to do.
Yeah.
And consequently, I would think that if you ask what the first thing I would do is make sure that that as part of this association of local governments or municipalities, councils, that we got together and formulated a policy that we would bring to the central government and make sure that we were working, that they were consulting with us and that they had our views throughout. And I would argue strongly on the points, while some things, while there could be areas of waste or areas of that could stand cuts at the municipal level, I would think, as I said a few minutes ago, you have to be very selective and careful in that you don't cut things that are going to really hinder the economy in the long run. And retraining for people going from one type of work to another. You've got to keep peace and stability in society, so you don't want to cut programs that will encourage massive demonstrations and strikes. You've got to, we've seen that in Greece recently, and in some other parts of the world where they had to do drastic cuts. So you've got to work this through with great wisdom and a lot of consultation. I think you have to work with, and I said that the municipalities have to work with the central government. I think they have to also work with the social organizations in their communities, the ones for public housing, the ones for healthcare, the medical associations, the organizations for public education, from the lowest levels to the university level, to technical education, trade unions, and so on. I mean, it requires a lot of consultation, so no one person or no one level of government, I think, can really solve this problem or prevent damage in the economy.
Thank you.